What's going on, everyone? It's Adrian from Draft Time, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to win FanDuel Snake Drafts. Okay, now for those of you who are not familiar, FanDuel recently acquired the Draft app, and the way the Draft app worked was it was similar to FanDuel and DraftKings in that there were daily fantasy contests, but instead of having a salary where you pick all the players and try to fit it under the salary cap, the way it worked is you did a live snake draft with other players. Okay, so now you can actually access this snake draft format from within the FanDuel platform. And the way you do that is you come over here, and right over here you see this snake draft option here. And there's two different things that say snake draft. And the difference is this first one right here is for the full slate of games on Sunday. And you have to pick one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers / tight ends, and then a flex position. And this other snake draft option, this is the any flex option. So basically the way this works is you pick 3 players total, okay, from one game. So in this case, it's only the Sunday night game, and you could pick 3 players from any position. Okay, and the only restriction is you can't have more than 2 players from the same team, which is very important, and I'm going to get into that later in this video. I want to caveat, this video is how to win FanDuel Snake Drafts, but just because you follow these guidelines doesn't mean you're always going to win. First of all, the way it works is FanDuel automatically assigns you a position that you draft from. So if you're doing one of these any flex drafts, okay, you're only picking 3 players. So if you have the 3rd pick in the first round, that also means you're going to have the 3rd pick in the 3rd round. So drafting from the 3rd position on these any flex drafts, it really puts you at a disadvantage. But if you use some of the guidelines and some of the tools that I try to provide you with in this video, you'll put yourself in the best possible position to win, even when you do get the short end of the stick and end up having to pick later in the rounds. So first of all, there's 6 important factors that you must consider when you're doing a snake draft, okay? First of all, what are your team needs? You know, you might have drafted 2 running backs but not a wide receiver yet, okay? And this is very important, and I'll get into why it's so important later on. Also, what are my opponent's team needs, okay? Which is also very important, something that you have to consider when you're drafting in one of these snake drafts, okay? Who's going to get drafted in between my picks, okay? Or I should say, who is likely going to get drafted in between my picks? That's very important. What is the positional drop-off for a player I'm considering, okay, which goes hand in hand with the last factor that I just mentioned? How many players do I have from a specific team? That's something that I mentioned earlier, where in those any flex drafts, you can only have 2 players from the same team. Also, how many players do my opponents have from a specific team, which is also very important, which I'll get into later on. So let me give you some scenarios where you might have to consider some of these factors. So one thing that I mentioned was you need to know how many players you have from a specific team and how many players your opponent has from a specific team. And this is especially important on the single game snake drafts, because you could only have 2 players from the same team. So let's take a look at the following example. Let's suppose that you're in a 3-person draft for the Tampa Bay versus Chicago Bears snake draft. And you have the 2nd pick in the draft, and it's the 2nd round, and you're making your 2nd pick. And team 1 has Tom Brady, you have Ronald Jones, and then team 3, they picked Nick Foles and Allen Robinson on the turnaround, and now it's your turn to pick again. So you have round 2, pick 2, and then team number 1 has round 2, pick 3, then they have round 3, pick 1, and then you have round 3, pick 2 again, okay? And the best available players are Mike Evans, and then David Montgomery, and then Scotty Miller, Rob Gronkowski, and Anthony Miller. So obviously you want to take Mike Evans because he's the best available player, correct? No, that's actually wrong. In this scenario, you would want to take David Montgomery, and here's why. If you take Mike Evans, then that means you have Mike Evans and Ronald Jones. So that means you already have 2 Tampa Bay players, which means you won't be able to select Scotty Miller, Rob Gronkowski. You'll be forced to take Anthony Miller with that last pick because he's the only player left from Chicago that's worthwhile taking. And that's assuming that your opponent takes David Montgomery, which most likely he or she will. So in this scenario, you should take David Montgomery, because if you take Mike Evans, then that means you're going to likely draft Mike Evans and then Anthony Miller. So that gives you 22.2 combined fantasy points. But if you take David Montgomery, then that means you'll be able to take Rob Gronkowski, because David Montgomery plays for the Bears. So that means you'll be able to take someone from the Bucs with your third pick. So if you do that, then your projected for the 2 picks would be 23.8. But you even have to take it a step further. If you take David Montgomery with your pick, then your opponent most likely will take Mike Evans, and then that means he'll have Tom Brady and Mike Evans, so he'll have 2 Tampa Bay players. So he will be forced to take Anthony Miller, which means you could actually get Scotty Miller. So if you take David Montgomery, you'll have David Montgomery and Scotty Miller. So you'll have a projected total for those two for 24.9. If you take Mike Evans, then you'll have Mike Evans and likely Anthony Miller for a projected total of 22.2 between those two guys. So just by knowing how many players you have from a specific team and how many players your opponent has from a specific team, you're able to increase your total projections in this scenario by 2.7 fantasy points. Now, this is more important for your single game slates than your full roster slates, because on the full roster slates, you can actually draft 4 players from the same team. So there's not too many scenarios where you'll be drafting, more than 4 players from the same team. But occasionally it does happen, so you do still have to consider it. Now, another factor that I mentioned that's critically important when you're drafting your team, and this applies to your full roster slates, is you need to know what the positional drop-off is for a player that you're considering. So let me go ahead and show you an example. So in the following example, you're drafting 5th in a 6-team snake draft, okay? And you're already drafted for your first 2 rounds. You took Mike Davis, the running back, and DeAndre Hopkins. And then team number 6, they already took Ezekiel Elliott and Derrick Henry. So now it's your turn to pick in the 3rd round, okay? And then so that means that you have the 5th pick in the 3rd round, and then team 6 has the 6th pick in the 3rd round. Then team 6 also has the 1st pick in the 4th round, and then you have the 2nd pick in the 4th round, okay? And there's a bunch of players that you're considering taking. The best available players are Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Miles Sanders, Adam Thielen, Kenyon Drake, and then Keenan Allen. So, conventional wisdom would be to take Lamar Jackson here because he's projected to put up the most points. But that is not the case, and you shouldn't do that. You should consider the positional drop-off. So in this case, Lamar Jackson is projected to score 22.3 fantasy points, and Josh Allen is projected to score 22 fantasy points. So there's not much of a drop-off there, only 0.3 fantasy points. And then if you look at the running backs, Miles Sanders is projected to put up 16.23 fantasy points, and then Kenyon Drake is projected to put up 15.7 fantasy points. So again, not much of a drop off there, only a half a fantasy point. But Adam Thielen is projected to put up 15.9 fantasy points, and then Keenan Allen is projected to put up 14 fantasy points. So Keenan Allen is a 1.9 fantasy point drop off from Adam Thielen, which is by far the highest. So in this scenario, you would have to take Adam Thielen. Now, another very important factor is what positions has your opponent drafted, okay? So let me switch up the example from before just a little bit so I can show you what I'm talking about. So let's suppose that it's your turn to draft in the 3rd round, and you have the 5th pick again, and team number 6 drafts in between you, and then you draft again in the 4th round after team number 6. And you already selected Mike Davis and DeAndre Hopkins. And your opponent, this time, they drafted Patrick Mahomes and Ezekiel Elliott. And the best available players, let's suppose that there is a huge drop-off this time on your quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson in this scenario is projected to put up 22.3 fantasy points, and Josh Allen is projected to put up 17 fantasy points. So there's a huge drop-off there of 5.3 fantasy points, okay? Which is by far more than the drop-off for any of these other guys. So you would think to take Lamar Jackson in this situation, but you know that your opponent already has a quarterback, so you could get Lamar Jackson actually with your 2nd pick in the 4th round, because you know team number 6 is not going to be able to take him. But all of this stuff is a lot of different things that you need to keep in mind when you're drafting, and you only have 30 seconds to draft. So how exactly can you consider all these factors in just 30 seconds? Well, luckily, we have a tool that helps you do that you can access on drafttime.com, and it's very, very simple. And let me go ahead and show you how it works. So all you do is you go to drafttime.com, you come over here to NFL, and you choose this FanDuel Snake Draft, which I already have open. And this is available for members only, but you could sign up for a free 7-day trial if you want to try it. So once you access this, you can choose your sport, either the NFL, NBA, or MLB, and you could choose your DFS site. But right now, only FanDuel has the Snake Draft available. So once you do that, you could go ahead and select your slate. And in this case, I'm going to select the main slate. Now, all you do is you put the number of teams in your draft. So let's suppose that you're in a 6-person draft and you're selecting the 5th pick overall. And once you do that, you could hit start draft. But if you want to tweak any of the projections beforehand, you can do that by just going to a player's name and going to his projection and putting whatever you want to put there. Like, let's say you think Patrick Mahomes is not going to do that well. You can maybe change that to 24.5 or so. But let's go ahead and put it back to 25.5, and let's hit start draft. And it's very simple. All you have to do is select this plus icon as each player drafts. Okay, so let's just suppose that the draft is going along as you would expect it to go along. And now it's your turn to pick with the 5th pick in the first round. And right over here on the bottom here, it tells you who exactly we suggest you to pick. And in this case, we suggest you to pick Kareem Hunt, the running back for the Cleveland Browns. And we have a little score here, the DD score. And the DD score is basically a score that we assign that takes all of those factors into consideration. And if you don't like Kareem Hunt in this scenario, you could choose skip, and it'll show you the next suggested pick, which is Lamar Jackson. And you could just keep going on until you find a player that you like. But you want to look at the DD score. So for Kareem Hunt, the DD score is 9.1. And then for Lamar Jackson, it's 9.06. So there's not too much of a drop off there. So maybe, you have a gut feeling that Lamar Jackson's going to have a big game and you want to go with him. That's not a big deal. But if you skip again, you'll see James Robinson, 8.11. So there is a pretty large drop off from Lamar Jackson to James Robinson. So let's go ahead and go with Kareem Hunt. So let's choose him, and then you just keep following along. So let's say the next guy takes Lamar Jackson, and then he takes James Robinson, and now it's your turn to pick again. And it's suggesting for you to pick Tyreek Hill. So you go ahead and you select Tyreek Hill, and eventually, when you're done selecting all your players and you're done putting in all of your opponent's players, you could come over here to teams, and you could see the projected totals for all of the teams. And then you see team 5 right here. That's your team, and you'll be able to see your total. And most of the time, if you follow this strategy, you'll have the highest, if not close to the highest projected total. It's going to give you a huge, huge, huge advantage. I can't emphasize that anymore. Now, you got to make sure that as the teams are drafting, you're hitting these plus icons in the correct order of the players who are being drafted, because this optimizer needs to know who's on each player's team so that it could give you a more accurate suggestion for a player and the best possible suggestion for a player, because we know if a team has specific players and specific positions filled, we're able to better optimize your suggested pick based on what their teams have and what their team needs are. So again, I'm going to emphasize, you need to make sure that you add the players in the correct order by hitting these plus icons in the correct order. Very, very important. And I suggest doing a couple of mock drafts first, or a couple of free FanDuel Snake Drafts first, actually, to make sure you get a hang of it. And then you could go ahead and enter some paid contests after you get some practice. And another thing I'm going to suggest is that you use this tool on a desktop computer, and then you enter the FanDuel draft on your phone. So you have this tool from Draft Time on your computer, and then you draft from your phone. Or if you have dual monitors, I suggest using the dual monitors. On one monitor, you have FanDuel. On the other monitor, you have this tool up. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention. Sometimes FanDuel likes to add players to their slates because maybe a team ended up picking up a specific player. So if you're in the middle of a draft and there's a player who just so not happens to be on this tool, all you do is come over here and you hit add custom player, and then you just let the tool know who the player is, what position he is, and what team he plays for. And if a player who drafts before you happens to select that player who's not on this list, you'll be able to add him onto this list. So again, let me know if you have any questions. Leave me feedback about this tool. Let me know if you can think of any ways to improve it. Make sure you hit this video a thumbs up because I want to start making a lot more videos a lot more frequently, and I need a lot more thumbs up. And the more thumbs up I get, the more it'll start suggesting my videos to more people, and we could go ahead and grow our business and grow our following. But anyways, good luck to everyone. Again, you can sign up for a free trial on Draft Time, free 7-day trial. You could cancel anytime before the 7 days are done if you're not satisfied. And good luck to everyone.